Hello, family. My name is James Trice, and I'm the creator of a podcast called YANA, or You Are Not Alone. You Are Not Alone is a podcast for Black men. It is more than just a podcast. It's a lifeline and a brotherhood. We're here to create a supportive, judgment-free space where Black men can have real, open conversations about what truly matters to us, from family and relationships to community, sports, culture, politics, faith, sex, race, education, and the challenges of everyday life. We dive deep into it all. Whether you're looking for advice, motivation, prayer, or just the comfort of knowing you're not walking this journey alone. YANA is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard, because none of us are meant to do life alone. Look for new episodes weekly wherever you get your podcasts. And look for me on Instagram at jbtrice123. Welcome to YANA. Grace and peace, everyone. This is James Trice again. Thank you so much for joining this episode of YANA. You Are Not Alone, a space where Black men can come together. We could talk about issues that matter most to us, uncensored, judgment-free space. We realize that we don't walk this journey of life alone because none of us are meant to do life alone. So thank you again for joining this episode of YANA. And today's guest, we have none other than Sam Grant. And real quick, I just want to say Sam and I have been knowing each other ever since I moved to Minneapolis from the south side of Chicago in 1990. And we've been knowing each other since then. He's been a major part of my work, and the work that I do have influenced a lot of the work I do, has been an encouragement to me, support to me in my work. We work together on many, many, many projects, and I'm glad I'm able to catch him because he's really, really busy, and every once in a while we get a chance to come together and do work together, and we're doing some projects together right now. We're in the midst of a few projects that we're working on together, and so I just want to welcome Sam to YANA. Sam, introduce yourself, tell the audience what you want them to know about you, and let's get right into this discussion. I'm excited about it.
Great to be in circle with you always. And for the listening audience, just take a moment and soak in significance and necessity of the highest level of Black brilliance and Black joy each of us can bring into the universe with every breath, with every step we take in the world. We are the leaders the world has been waiting for and looking for, the world's original people, looking at the patterns that the world has created and saying it's time for some correction. So let's do some correction together. So my name is Sam. I am the son of Sam and Alice, and my parents were both transformative organizers in their own, way of showing up in the world. And it was, sort of sitting at their feet and all of the people they brought into our living room and into our lives through their leadership that has largely informed, who I am as a person. My dad rolled with Paul Robeson, so that was an early influence. My mom was good friends with Alice Walker and Toni Morrison, so those were early influences on my life. When I was a little boy, we moved to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. I went to the same church as President Nyerere, and we lived in a compound with the leader of Frelimo, Eduardo Mondlane. That was my uncle. So from the age of 5, I got a clear sense of what it meant to be a Black person in the world. I wasn't really thinking about the United States. I was thinking about the world. And, I came back to the United States from Tanzania, and, the teacher in the classroom said, "This is Sammy, and he just came back from Tanzania." And all of the students, all of them, all these Black students in Evanston, Illinois, they all stood up and they did the Tarzan thing. Put the hand under their armpit, and they all made that sound. And that was my introduction back to the United States, was realizing the profound internalized oppression we have with Black people, our image of who we are in the world, of what Africa is in terms of our own, origin story, completely distorted by white supremacy culture. So who I am is a person who's been informed by the juxtaposition of an ancient lineage of Black brilliance navigating in the world that has been distorted by this pathology of white world supremacy that needs to be countered with every fiber of our being. But we can't just focus on countering it, encountering and transforming something. We have to be cognizant of what we're bringing. And so, what we have to bring is the way that Amilcar Cabral talked about return to that deeper source of who and what we are and bring it forward in an evolutionary vantage point to create the world we wish to see. So I'm a dreamer and I'm not a wild, impractical dreamer. Everything I dream about, I try and put into practice on a day-to-day basis. So that's what we'll be
Mm.
talking about a little bit today is what that looks like in Sam's universe, trying to like be relevant in terms of the context of what's impacting the lives of Black men on the planet right now.
Well, thank you for joining. So let me ask this. I mean, when you were talking, introducing yourself, you talked about you all the influences, man, and these are great. I mean, Paul Robeson and all of the folks you just mentioned, man, are wonderful. And that must have been an incredible experience, really being in spaces where those change makers were. And you talked about you realize or you learn what it means to be a black man in the world. Can you share that with us, with the audience? What does it mean to be a black man in the world? Not just in America. What does it mean to be a black man in the world?
Yeah. So I think we have to both unpack and then join back together Black and man. So
Hmm.
to be a man in a heteropatriarchal world system is to have this false belief that men are superior to women. So that's something that all men have to deal with and work on. But to be a Black man, you're set up in a constructed hierarchy in which you're always a second or third or fourth class citizen, or not a citizen at all. You're just a target. And so we, as Black men, given our different experiences of the socio-ecological dynamics in the world, some of us get brought in to be managers of Blackness and definers of what's appropriate for Black men to do. And some of us are just kind of caught in this matrix of the plantation and the ghetto and the prison. And in those places of oppression and extreme marginalization,
Mhm.
our Black brilliance gets crystallized in a way that it does not if we don't face struggle, if we don't face hardship. And so I think a
Mhm.
lot of the most significant leaders that we've ever seen are Black men who were targeted because they were Black and they were men. And it's that combination of being Black
Mhm.
and a man. So you're a man, so you're supposed to stand up for your people. That's part of the training in heteropatriarchy. Men are supposed to be the warriors, the soldiers, the generals, the presidents, the leaders. So we get all of that kind of training, but that training gets displaced from leading society in the mainstream to leading the underground of society because that's kind of where we're forced as Black men to kind of be at the bottom of the society. And we create a world for ourselves at the bottom of society, trying to make a way out of no way, which is a form of brilliant creativity and practice that can't find a way to evolve to this higher level of scale. So for me, my message to Black men in the world is everywhere I look on the planet, everywhere I look, Black communities are still impacted by the intersecting dynamics of
Mhm.
structural racism,
Mhm.
capitalism,
Mhm.
imperialism, colonialism, and
Mhm.
patriarchy. And
Mhm.
then, the religious divide, right?
Mhm.
And nationalism. And part of the work of Black men is to see beyond the way we've been conditioned against each other. Like you think about Black men who are from Africa and Black men who are descendants of slaves here
Mhm.
in the United States or somewhere else in the
Right.
world. We get caught up in all of these internalized narratives about we're not you, you're not us. And we get problematic in terms of bringing each other down instead of focusing on our common fight. So for me, the message to Black men is we have to work on the world stage together, not just within one nation. We have to work on the world stage.
Well, so what is our common fight then? You talked about the divide between, uh, the descendants of African slaves, black men who were descendants, and then you talk about the immigrants and how there's a divide there because we don't realize there is a common fight. What is the common fight that we have, or the struggle that we have, and then how do we come together?
Yeah. One expression of the common fight is that everywhere you look in the world, um, you see this pattern of the rate of poverty, the rate of unemployment being double or more than double it is for the privileged population in any region of the world, whether that's white people, whether that's Japanese people, Chinese people, Korean people, Vietnamese people, Australian people, so on and so forth. European people on in the European Union. Um, there's this pattern of this exclusive racial division of labor and the racial division of wealth. And underneath that is this deeper story about how the world has been constructed against our well-being. So I think the key thing that brings Black men together on the planet is to entertain questions with each other of what facilitates the well-being of every single one of us, everybody in our family systems, everybody in our communities, and everybody who impacts the quality of our own existence. Um, so for me, it's an existential question, and I think about it from a lens of critical Black ecology, learning from the work of Nathan Hare and the piece he wrote in 1970 in The Black Scholar. It was sort of, critiquing, and this is how you and I began some of our more recent work together, James, on the Environmental
Right,
Justice Coordinating Council, to be Black in a world where ecology has been shaped by white supremacy itself, the environmental movement completely hijacked and shaped by white supremacy culture itself. How do we define our ecological space on the planet? So, for me, an important question for Black men is to think about how do we grow the ecological space for well being and stop letting other people dictate the spaces available to us and the processes by which we facilitate our own well being. So I have been for the last several years working on the climate crisis and looking at climate change as a important, arena for Black men to stand up and begin to organize with each other. Um, a whole lot of people in the Black community, similar to the environmental movement itself, James, as you know, when we first did the interviews with folks in the Black community about the
that's
environment, what
right.
did they say to us? They said, well, the environment's been hijacked by white people. That's a white conversation. But we asked them, well, underneath the whiteness of it, how do you, situate yourself in the environment? Well, okay, I'm living in a place where I've got unhealthy soil. I'm living in a place with substandard housing. I'm living in a place where the air is dirty and I have health disparities that I didn't create that I can't figure out how to escape. All these things were created on top of me, not by me, not for me, and it's pissing me off. I don't know what to do about it yet, though. So you and me created the Environmental Justice Coordinating Council to give people an antidote to that ecological oppression, to that ecological violence, as you talk about. So as I think with and organize with Black men around the planet, I'm asking these questions. How is the inhospitable climate created for you as a Black man, as a Black person on the planet, reinforced and escalated by this new crisis of climate change that is making floods more prominent in your community than anyone else's, drought more prominent in your community than anyone else's, increasing insurance costs, impacting you more than it is in people in other communities. Um, Food price, increases, housing price increases due to gentrification as climate forces people to go into enclaves that are divided by class and race. So everything that was wrong with our relations in the world before the climate crisis is now being accelerated by the climate crisis. And my challenge and my task is to pay attention to that crisis, but also pay attention to the constant kind of innovation that we always practice as Black people. And so right now, one of my projects I'm calling the Pan-African Living Ecologies Action Research Network, identifying leaders in Black communities, Black men and women all over the African diaspora who are doing things on the ground to make life better for the whole community. So people are working on strategies to replace industrial agriculture with agroecology and really saying we have to feed the soil in order to feed ourselves. And we have to stop buying commodified products that are, sold to us through export markets. So we have to start growing food that nourishes our well-being and our culture and our relations with each other on the land right here. And that's a possibility that agroecology offers to us. We have to think about something that many people call watershed democracy. None of us can live without water. And the water crisis, because of capitalism and imperialism, is setting up a dynamic where too many people don't have access anymore. And if they have access at all, it's to very dirty water, which causes all kinds of pathologies, in the human body. So watershed democracy is telling people you have to take responsibility for the quality of water in your environment. Otherwise, you don't have a future. So to take care of the future, we have to take care of the water. So I'm teaching people how to use these tools so that they can begin to do analysis about their organizing at the scale of the watershed they live in. So that's an exciting new direction I'm doing with two other Black men who are scientists, at the University of Minnesota. Very exciting work.
It sounds exciting. How does one take control of the water uh, in their community, particularly when the water is controlled by, a city government, right?
Well,
How
it's
does
controlled
one
by
take
city
control?
government, but also by special jurisdictions that
Right,
we don't have any voice or influence over. So part of it, step one, is awareness of how are watersheds where you live managed. Step
right,
two is how do you begin to intervene in the dynamics of how the watershed is managed so that you can begin to say, in order for us to have a watershed that works for all of us, we have to change these particular patterns. Right now, if you go into a meeting of a soil and water district, anywhere in Minnesota, you won't see people who look like you and me there.
right,
Part of what we have to change is that, but we can't just go in without having deep awareness of what's at stake there and knowing how to use tools that actually allow us to inform and shift the practice of watershed governance so it actually benefits everybody. So, with these two Black scientists at the University of Minnesota, we have brought watershed managers across the Twin Cities region together, even greater Minnesota together. And we've used this superior approach to data analysis to get people to think more openly about the watershed and invite them to begin to bring into the conversation people who are most impacted by the lack of water quality or water futures, water security, and make them part of the conversation going forward. So, what we've noticed so far is that people are excited about more complex data analysis, which data geeks love, but they're also recognizing that they have to begin to think about people who are part of this watershed that are never part of the conversation. Now that's inadequate, James, as you and I both know.
yep, right,
Part of what we have to do is train the next generation of watershed scientists so our soil and watershed districts are led by people who look like us, using an environmental justice framework to make sure everybody benefits everywhere. So we come with this orientation being impacted by injustice profoundly and comprehensively. And because we know that in our bones, we won't stand for it for ourselves. And we also won't stand for it for anybody else. So
right,
it's the path to mutual benefit to let to not let, the people who have been impacted by this oppression are saying the space for you to let me do something has been canceled. The space where I'm taking leadership, whether you're ready for it or not, is here, is present, and it's growing. Adapt. Adapt because we're not adapting to your bullshit anymore. This is
right.
the new paradigm we have to work from. This is a Black power paradigm. And people think Black power is a dangerous and a scary and a dirty word that shouldn't be allowed and should be repressed and killed and destroyed. But people need to understand that in reality, as the original people in the world,
Yes.
when Black power manifests, since all people come from a Black root, everybody benefits. It's the path to mutual liberation, is to honor Black liberation as the path to mutual liberation. And I know that sounds like ridiculous philosophical, rhetoric for anybody who doesn't come from this liberation tradition. And so this is the question we have to face as Black men. How do we talk to each other? And how do we talk to people in different bodies who have a hard time understanding our reality? And when they begin to understand our reality, they're fundamentally at the root level threatened by it. And they want to squish it, into non-existence. And so I think one thing that's true for Black men in the 21st century, the same as it was in the 15th century, is ever since the imposition of the slave economy, which was the basis of, colonialism, which became the basis of capitalism, starting with the first capture and sale of Africans from the continent in 1442. We have had centuries of this hidden dynamic of guilt and fear. People have done something they know is wrong. They have no clue what to do to make it right. They don't want to pay reparations. They know that for sure, right? Because it was people in an earlier generation who did the harm. It wasn't them. So I ain't got nothing to do with it. I'm just trying to live.
Right.
I'm just trying to make it. And the reality is that the patterns of the plantation economy that existed in 1442 and got extended, it's now a global plantation economy that benefits a few billionaires at the expense of the rest of the people on the planet. And we, following in the example of Fred Hampton Sr.,
Hmm.
have an opportunity as Black men to frame the 21st century Rainbow Coalition. How do we bring people together in the Black community and between the Black community and all other communities that are impacted by this severe oppression and
Hmm.
repression, and imagine a world worth having where every child, whether it's a Black child or a child of another culture, um, can wake up and not be mad at their parents and mad at the world and feel like, what's going on here, right? Is this a world I want to grow up in? Is this a world I want to have children in? There's a lot of people I talk to, James, who are living with those questions right now. And those are important things for people to be grappling with. But what I'm not seeing is people not just having a hope horizon, but people having a sense of how to be evolutionary in this moment. And so I think teaching people how to be creatively responsive in this predicament that we're in is one very important key that I think Black men and Black women can be an important kind of catalyst for because of our profound dynamic DNA of creativity. So we got a lot to bring. And I think that we have to stop canceling ourselves out with our internalized depression and just bring the fullness of what we got. And like you say at the beginning of every episode of YANA, we can't do it as isolated, alienated individuals. We have to be in relationship with people who strengthen us, who will partner with us in the deepest kind of evolutionary solidarity to create a different world.
So how do we do that? How do we decolonize our mind? Right? How do we decolonize our mind? How do we detach ourselves from this internalized oppression that we are in many of us are affected with? Or I call it a disease, are diseased with this internalized oppression. How do we just separate ourselves from it? How do we free ourselves from that?
Yeah, it's an important question. And, my teacher in that regard, one of my many teachers, is Stephen Bantu Biko in the
Yes.
Black consciousness movement in South Africa. One of the things that he said is the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And I'll go further and say it's not just the mind of the oppressed, it's the body of the oppressed. Martin Luther King Jr. at the 10th convening of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference said This is 1967, the year before he was assassinated. When they've got you bent over, they've got you. And so something that internalized oppression does is it distorts our way of being in the world. We're twisted in a way that's subservient to an external, power source. And that external power source isn't open to us being equal. That power source needs us to be subservient. And so when we say not willing to be subservient to you ever again, and not willing to let anybody else who looks like me be subservient to you either, then we have this long history of assassination of Black men, right? Um, and I think that that's part of the internalized oppression. I won't accept this, but I have to fight in a way that's really, really wise because they'll be looking for me, they'll be gunning for me, they will cancel me out. And I don't want that to happen either. So we've got the people who have said, in order for the people to live, some of us have to die. And a lot of people committed what, Huey Newton called revolutionary suicide, and a lot of people, kind of went down that path. And I saw that same thing in the American Indian movement, people saying, in order for all of our people to live, some of us have to be willing to die. And I feel like we have to really think about this internal process of reconciling how I have internalized white supremacy culture in myself. So, am I
Many of us
reading?
don't recognize it though. Many of
Well,
us
that's
don't.
true.
You know what I'm saying?
So
How do we get them
a
first to
beginning point
begin
is
to recognize it?
a
Yep.
beginning point is to recognize it. So,
Yep.
in the 70s and early 80s, we had cultural institutions, that were created, in the Black community to give us a way to, reconnect with our culture and to begin to pay attention to the fact that we are not just descendants of slaves. We're also the, descendants of people from the African continent who had amazing cultures, right?
Right.
And amazing economies. And, we're creators of all kinds of science and technology. And so, I mean, that's important work. But I think beyond what happened in the past and what happened in my own family system, I think that too many of us never get greeted by somebody who reminds us how beautiful and brilliant we are as Black people. And we don't live in institutions where that reminder is constant, where we see that everywhere. I mean, what's the majority of teachers in the school system in Minnesota?
White
Where
women.
you live in, right? Was 85%, right?
Yep.
And so if a Black child doesn't see a representation of themselves in the curriculum or in the teaching of the curriculum, that's a problem. If a Black child looks at the media and sees an image of them or a juxtaposition of power and privilege and possibility, and they see a dynamic in which for white people that looks one way, and for Black folks it looks another way. So why do we have so many Blacks who feel like either I got to be in the hood and play the hood games, or I got to be a basketball player or a football player, right? Or a famous athlete or movie star? We're stuck in the entertainment complex. It's the entertainment complex or the prison industrial complex. Those are kind of our options, as Black
Right.
men.
Hmm.
And that's the internalized oppression makes it difficult for us to see beyond what the matrix has offered. So I think
Mm.
that for me, call in with respect, Mother Atum and her work with the Cultural Wellness Center. Mother Atum
Right.
and several others, you know, ran this program on the north side, where we were offering a space for Black youth to be deeply supported with love, community, and culture. And the way that Mother Atum defines it, disease is the loss of community, the loss of culture, and individualism. So when we begin to try and function in the matrix without community care and community support and without a cultural framework to operate from, we're lost. And we're swimming against a tide that's never going to be welcoming to us. And
Right.
that's one way to describe the existential Black condition when we're stuck inside the dynamics of oppression. So, what does it look like for us to get outside of that dynamic and begin to swim in a tide of our own making? What does that look like? And how do
Right.
we invite people to that common tide that facilitates the well being of all of us? That's work still in process. I think about Wade Nobles in this book he wrote on the Haitian Revolution. Um, and he sort of talked about it as the unfinished revolution. So that process that Black people began to make Haiti the first
Mm-hmm.
place in which slavery was canceled um,
Mm-hmm.
in the late 18th century. And then Haiti was forced to pay reparations to France, right? And Haiti has been stuck in hell ever since um, because of the attack on it by the entire white world system, right? Um, in so many ways that are profound. And so I think Haiti, in some ways, is a metaphor for our experience as Black men in the world. So I actually think that it's important for Black men to study that and to ask the question, how are we contributing to the unfinished Haitian revolution, which is really an abolitionist call to abolish all forms of oppression. So, what does that look like to go from being bent over, going back to Martin Luther King Jr., to standing up with this value system that says, until all people are free, I can't be free. I'm going to be a resource for that. What do I need in order to be a resource for that? Obviously, as an individual, I really can't be a resource for that. I got to be surrounded by a whole lot of bold and brilliant people who are standing next to me, arm in arm, heart to heart, soul to soul, saying, this is moving and it can't be stopped. This is
Right.
moving and it can't be stopped. And I think that part of the work right now is to get enough people to embody that. And I think right now, part of internalized depression is this reality that we look around us and we see a whole lot of people struggling, and we don't really see enough of the kind of energy people are bringing in Minnesota right now, the anti-ice energy people are bringing in Minnesota right now. That's ephemeral. You know, it comes and it goes, and it's in one place. Part of the work is to go from the micro scale of this just happening in Minnesota, but this happening all across the world. And we think back to George Floyd, there was a moment during the George Floyd, uprising when a whole lot of people said never again. But conditions compelled people to get back to business as usual because people had to get back to the day-to-day work of trying to keep their lives in effect. And our lives are in effect in what? Our lives are in effect in a plantation economy in which we don't have the power of determination over when we work, when we sleep, how much we get paid, who we work with, what the work product is, right? What the waste stream from that work product is,
Right.
who's hurt by that that work stream and that waste stream. So there's a lot of ways in which we're not in control of our own destinies. And this is the question we have to, really entertain. Do we want a world in which the few elites dictate to the rest of us what life is? And we just say, thank you, master?
Mm.
Or do we want a world where there are no masters anymore? Now,
Mm.
I'm a Black man who doesn't want a master of any kind, right? And a lot of people have a hard time seeing that as an option. And I think we have to entertain where does that come from and what holds that in place. So I'm sorry, James, for kind of wandering around like a
No, no, no.
nomad.
You did wonderful. This is wonderful. Let me ask this. We got a few minutes here. I have a couple more questions I want to ask. I have several questions, actually. We should probably do this again. How do you see the future for Black men? How do you see the future for Black men?
I'll be honest. I mean, the first place I go when I get asked that question is I think about all of the men who are my heroes who were assassinated.
Mm.
And so it brings me back to somebody you and I both love and were mentored by from the ancestral realm, Ella Baker. And
Mm.
Ella Baker's approach to collective leadership. I really believe that her intervention in the civil rights movement was critical. She saw that the
Yes.
movement was led by a lot of Black men who were elitist and not really making space for the Black youth to
Yep.
participate, or the Black poor to participate, not really raising the voice of everybody. She said, as long as we have one person who's always at the front, it's easy to
Yep.
chop them off, and that has a profound impact on the future. So let's think about Malcolm X at the end of his life in the Organization for African American Unity. And he hadn't yet been alive long enough to set the conditions for the Organization for African American Unity to begin to put its energy in place. And I'll make the argument, James, that what he was doing is very significantly what we need to be doing right now. Same with Marcus Garvey and the United Negro Improvement Association,
Right.
building these massive formations that were
Mm.
self-determined and cooperative, where we said we're going to create the future we want for ourselves. We have the resources within ourselves to create that future. We're not going to let anybody stop us, external to us. Now, I believe that in one of our last conversations, I mentioned this to you, James, that we're going after money from philanthropy, and we're going after money
Right.
from rich individuals. And I really think that we have to start to go back to the experiment that didn't last too long that Leon Sullivan did in Philadelphia, where he did the 1030 program. Let's begin to take our pennies and our nickels and our dimes and our quarters, and our $20 bills, and let's start to put them together into community trusts that we own and control, and use those community trusts to take back land, create our own business enterprises, link those business enterprises together, and train ourselves and young people around these questions of what are the technologies that we need in the 21st century to live well in a way that takes care of our relationship with the climate and takes care of our relationship with each other. How do we grow an abundance so that I'm no longer living in scarcity? Because when I live in scarcity, you ask me for something, I'm going to block. And if Black men
Right.
get blocked when they ask another brother for care, I think about that song, Change is going to come. I
Mm.
went to
Sam
my
Cooke.
brother. Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
right. And
Yeah.
so that's something that we have to counter, is the
Mm.
way that we treat each other in the context of working for our liberation. It has to be an unstoppable collective process where we forgive ourselves and forgive each other for any missteps that we make. And we say, we can't get to the future we want without right relationship with each other. So let's keep healing in our relations and show the world what it looks like to heal in relation within and across cultures. People will begin to see that's the energy that I want to join with. So we have to be exemplary of the future we want in the present. And then I think people will be invited by that, and they'll begin to say, we're going to shift the tide with you. And we have to do that on an enduring basis. And here's the thing I'll end on, James. I mean, Robert C. Smith, now ancestor political scientist, wrote this book on the post-civil rights era. And he said, we have no leaders. And it was kind of a critique of not so much leadership, but of the system that distorts Black leadership. And he says,
Mm.
when Black people or any people make demands of a system that the system isn't willing to tolerate, like the simple demand for food or affordable housing, the system will first ignore you if you haven't demonstrated that you're quote unquote a threat to the system. Now, isn't that problematic in itself?
Yes.
Instead of seeing it as an invitation to be a better society, it says, oh, here's a threat. Let me stamp it. Let me squish it like a mosquito or an ant. So when neglecting you or ignoring you doesn't work, then there's repression. And the repression comes from media lynching, from assassination, from incarceration, from shaming in the community and making people not want to follow your example. When repression doesn't work, they co opt us, which means dividing the people they feel like they can tolerate from the people they can't tolerate. When that doesn't work, they recognize the Martin Luther King holiday, and they give us avenues named after Black leaders, right? They give us Juneteenth, right?
While they're killing us on those avenues,
That's
right?
right.
Martin Luther King
That's
Jr.
right.
Street
That's right.
and
That's
avenues
right.
across the country, many
That's right.
times there's a lot of violence going on those avenues, a lot of police
That's
brutality.
right.
If you look
That's
at
right.
that,
So
I mean, I've noticed
Robert
that.
Smith called that symbolic incorporation. So it's a
Yes.
symbol with no substance. And then the final, level that a system can bend is called substantive incorporation. Substantive incorporation happens at a moment when the country allows itself to elect Barack Obama as the president of the United States without changing the character of the United States of America, right? So, what did Barack Obama not take up as the president of the United States? He strenuously did not take up issues of racial injustice. He
Yeah.
strenuously did not take up issues of mass impoverishment and mass incarceration, right? So why is that? Why is that? Because he was working in a system where those things were out of bounds. Those were non-systemic demands, and he wanted to be the president of all of the people, not just the people who were excited to see him be the first black man to get into that role. So I'm not mad at him. It was a dynamic. He did the best he could within that moment, and I think there's a lesson for us as black men about what happens to us when we lead in a cultural context that doesn't match us. If we lead in a cultural context that doesn't match us, we get used in that context in a way that's oppositional to the well-being of everybody in our communities. And I think that's a source of pain and agony for people who get into those roles and can't figure out a way to extricate themselves from those roles. So, if we don't want to be oppressed by the way a system deals with non-systemic demands, what is the actual antidote? We have to think about, well, what do we replace this system with? What is a system? What's the design of a system that takes care of the well-being of all of life, all the ecosystems on which every life, whether it's black, brown, red, yellow, or blue, takes care of all of life? What does that require? What is a system that takes care of all of us within and across our cultures? How do we have a world that does that? And some people are saying, like the fascist turn in the world right now, that that's a pipe dream, that human beings need to be controlled. Human beings need a master. They need a powerful state. They need a big man to sort of direct, the flow of their life through a state that is, a representation of what the big man wants and what the big man thinks, the world needs to be. And that's kind of the situation we're in right now, where we see all over the planet, people are copying the example of the leader here now in the U.S. And we see all of this posturing by big men. Um, and I think that one of my hopes is that we start to realize that the world is going in a direction that is going to be really dangerous for the vast majority of us if we don't begin to do something transformative. So, yeah, midterm election is coming up, but voting in elections is always going to be inadequate in a representative democracy based in a constitution that serves elite interests.
Yeah.
So, a representative democracy based in a constitution that serves elite interests. How do we go from majority minority to humanity? This is a question. Are there enough people who are willing to be on that journey from where we are stuck now in terms of our level of consciousness and our problematic culture of materialism and consumerism and segregation, right? So we live in a world of ecological apartheid. We've been trained to be divided from the earth. We've been trained to be divided from each other. And have also been trained to be divided within ourselves, so we can't be our best whole self. You
Right.
work with a piece of me, and that piece of me is in conflict with another piece of me that somebody else is using in another way. I'm pulled apart. So part of working on healing ourselves and healing all of our relationships, coming back together in growing collectives that are big enough to face the enormity of the challenges in the world. And I think it's a struggle that's worth it. I'm living in that struggle. and I'm bringing, the best that I can bring to it, every day of my life. And I continue to recognize that two things are true. It's uphill, um, but I also, given the way I was raised by Sam and Alice, wake up every morning with the question, how am I going to be a resource for common well-being today? And every night when I go to bed, what did I learn today about my assets and my weaknesses, and how can I be better tomorrow? Help me in my dream state. God, ancestors, spirits, help me be better tomorrow when I awaken in the world to be a better resource for common well-being on the planet. And I encourage every other Black man and every other human being to entertain those same questions at the beginning and the end of every day. Have gratitude for what's going well, and I think that's important,
Right.
to like not just source from this deficit orientation that
That's
everything is
right.
messed up, but to realize we have grace.
That's
We
right.
live in a blessing and it's constant. And we have an opportunity as a vehicle of the Great Spirit to bring that blessing alive in all of our relations. And why would we do anything else if we have the opportunity? And so I think that we have to stop being stuck in the matrix and, grow some freedom together.
Right. Well, thank you, man. We have to end with that. Thank you so much, man. And of course, are you willing to come back, man, to continue this conversation? I mean, because we need to talk, unpack how do we escape from the matrix? Other questions that arise based on what you articulated so well today. So thank you for joining us. Uh, Thank you, everyone, for joining this episode of Yana. You are not alone. And until next time, remember, we're never meant to do life alone. So don't even try it. Grace and peace, everyone, and see you next
Right
time.
on, brother. All right. Thank you, Tim.
Yana is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard because none of us are meant to do life alone.